know, I'm not anybody famous, and I'm not a local personality, and I'm not even funny. I said, no, you just have to read the question. We're going to try without microphone first. And if anyone can't hear me or anyone else, just let them.
At USC in Columbia. I started my teaching career at Dorman High School, taught there, became assistant principal, superintendent. Currently I serve on the Anderson County Board of Education. I'm excited to be here tonight along with my other colleagues. This is a great venue. Good to be back in Charleston County. I will speak as I close as well about political correctness and how I think it has ruined our public education system. Again, thank you for having me here, and it's great being back in Charleston. Thank you.
So my name is Meka Childs. I'm a teacher, mentor, coach, mother, and devoted military wife. I'm proud that my husband is now a major promotable Felix Childs. We're raised as Lieutenant Colonel here soon. I'm a native of South Carolina, graduate of our public schools, prepared me to go off to Duke University, where I received my master's in public policy, my bachelor's in history, and also my license to teach. I worked in our schools as a teacher, taught social studies. I worked on Governor Sanford's staff as his education policy advisor. I also served on the Education Oversight Committee, where I voted against the adoption of the Common Core state standards. I also served with Dr. Zace as his deputy state superintendent of education. Pleased to have his endorsement. I look forward to talking to you about the things I'd like to do to advance education in our state. Again, my name is Meka Childs. Thank you.
My name is Amy Cofield. I'm one of 150 people running for state superintendent. I have a background in education. I taught school for 3 years after earning my BA and master's degree in education. After that, I'm the only candidate that attended law school. For the past 23 years, I have been the managing partner of my own law firm, Cofield Law Firm in Lexington, South Carolina. I have been an advocate for children. I have children presently in the public school. Last year, my 8th grader came home and told me he didn't have to do homework anymore because they weren't grading it. And then his next grade, he said, and by the way, my test I take on Friday, don't worry about it because if I don't do well, I get to do it over next week. This is when I jumped in and got involved. I led a community of 1,000 people to protest that grading policy that was implemented in Lexington District 1 along with the Common Core, and we got it changed. I'm Amy Cofield. I want to be an advocate for our children, and I ask that you vote for me on June 10th.
Good evening. I'm Sheri Few, and I'm seeking the Republican nomination for State Superintendent of Education. I'm the parent of 4 boys, all of whom attended and graduated public schools. And I was a very involved parent, and that's why I formed the organization South Carolina Parents Involved in Education in 2000. We formed that organization because we were concerned about curriculum content and standards that were being forced on us by the State Board of Education. Well, fast forward to 2014, and South Carolina Parents Involved in Education led the movement to stop the Common Core standards in South Carolina. And the good news is that the Senate passed just yesterday the House bill that will end the Common Core standards in South Carolina. As your next Superintendent of Education, I will also lead the effort to end taxpayer dollars funding the liberal bias and the falsehoods in public school classrooms, and I will lead the effort to institute school choice, not just for tax credits, but for vouchers in South Carolina.
I'm Don Jordan. I'm a USC professor. I'm tenured, full, been here since '92. As I drove in here, I said I was on a mission. And I've never run for an office before in my life, not even as a Sunday school class secretary. This is my first one. But I have 2 things in my pocket. I'm a member of Shannon Baptist Church in Canada. And when I'm talking to you, and none of you I gave you this card, but if I wasn't in the church, I would have probably gone for this one first, and it's my outreach. And so I like that sign that said, I'm on a mission, because that is one thing that I do every day, and that's outreach for Christ.
30 seconds.
Oh, yeah, that was the 30 second. I'm running to stop tuition increases, to reach out to students, and start student programs like I have all over the state of South Carolina for 3 decades. I can tell you more about myself. I've won awards. I'm a member of the AAAS, the American Association of Physical Science. It's the largest science organization in the world. I'm on the council. I work with the South Carolina Council of Teachers of Math. I won the best award for the South Carolina Council of Teachers. And so
Good evening. It's nice to be here amongst friends in my own backyard. You know that I live in Allendale on a farm with my husband and 4 children. My daughter is at Wanda, graduating this year. I hope she is. But you know, I'm on Charleston County School Board, and I think that's very important. It's been very eye-opening to be on the 2nd largest school district board in the state. So I understand the federal and state mandates that we have to deal with at the local level. I think that's important for the state superintendent. But my focus is very clear. It's student achievement, instructional quality, graduation. Graduation is really something that I'd like to briefly talk about. We are at 48th in the dropout rate in South Carolina in our graduation rate, in our not graduating. And I would like to have diploma options, to have our 4-year diploma, but also offer a technical diploma and also a special needs diploma to successfully complete your individual education plan that you too would earn a diploma. Because that's so important to economic development and job creation in the state, because we are judged by the quality of our secondary education based on our graduation rate. Thank you for having me.
Sarah, before you begin, I was going to also, I forgot to say this. I think if we hold our applause, then we can move along more quickly. I mean, I know they would appreciate it, but we'll clap at the end.
You, as the superintendent, deal with mandated dollars from the federal government. Dr. Zace was criticized for not accepting money because of the strings attached. Would you accept the demands of the federal government to accept funds?
That's an excellent question. I think that Dr. Zace was really unfairly criticized for not taking those particular funds. But I believe we have to understand this, that 6% of our budget is controlled by the federal government, but they have complete control over that 6% they give us. So I think it's time for a revolution. I think it's time for the state superintendent to stand up and speak up and to say, if we get those funds, we will implement and use those funds as we see fit in South Carolina. And then let them come after us if they need to come after us. Let them do what they have to do. But I really believe that we have to call the donkey in the room the donkey in the room. We've not been willing to do that. It's political correctness. And if you look at the federal government, be it Jimmy Carter, who created the Department of Ed, be it the Bushes, be it Clinton, be it Obama, is that we're on this cloud of political correctness. And we can't say what needs to be said in our school system. And teachers can't teach, and they cannot discipline. Therefore, we cannot go forward. So money is not the issue. The issue is how do we take control back of our public school system and give parents a choice. But I think, yes, it's our money. Take the money. But then say, by God, come after us. This is what we're going to do. And we just stand up and fight it.
It's going to be hard not to clap.
I know. We have to practice.
Okay. In order for students to graduate from high school in South Carolina, a student must earn 24 credits in state-approved courses. Those credits must be distributed in a very specific manner among the core high school subjects. However, South Carolina colleges require 18 credits for entry. Would you support a reduction in high school graduation requirements? Why or why not?
Thank you for that question. My objective as becoming the next state superintendent of education is to make sure that every child who graduates high school is ready for work or college and citizenship. One of the reasons I support rethinking the high school graduation requirements is because we have to be mindful of the fact that our children are all unique. They have different aspirations, different motivations. We need to make sure we're providing pathways that will allow them and their parents to get together and decide what they'd like to accomplish. So yes, I'm open to rethinking the credit requirements because I don't see where the credit requirements that we have are really compelling our students to move forward in the direction. It's really going to help them leverage what's coming forward. Our state's facing soon a huge economic upturn. And we need to be prepared prepare a workforce so that our students will be ready to take advantage of the jobs that will be available, but also be prepared to enter college. And so one reason I think we need to rethink the high school graduation requirements is so we can offer more flexibility and personalized education to the needs and aspirations of each child. But I think it's important that the decisions be made by parents and students and not by government bureaucrats dictating whether or not one child should be prepared for the workforce or the military or college or industry certification. The array of options need to be supported, and we need to allow flexibility in our high school graduation requirements.
Thank you.
I don't talk. That's good because I didn't have my
Okay. How will you make certain that our state adopts textbooks that are straightforward and honest without politically correct hogwash? Examining books that are up for adoption is a colossal task that takes much time. What is your plan for those jobs?
Amy, part of the problem that I have discussed with the Common Core and the elimination now of Common Core is we're still going to have to work hard to evaluate our curriculums that have been adopted to go along with the Common Core. As I spoke a minute ago about the grading policy that was also adopted, say, in my district, that too has issues that's going to have to be addressed. I, as a business person and a mother, I am for competition. I'm for school choice. I do not believe that taking competition out of school is a good thing. So I believe that we need to keep that in there. And thank you.
I wanted that question.
Everyone's been avoiding the big one, so don't try to time it. Wow.
Yeah, we will not start time. Some of these are long, but they had to be.
Had to be.
Had to be.
Yes.
Okay, I trust you, Kathy.
Many years ago, children attended one-room schoolhouses and were not separated by age or grade level. Our history books are filled with Americans who attended these schools, excelled, and became famous for their accomplishments. As superintendent, do you support a fluid educational delivery system where an underage, high-performing student can participate in classes with older students of his same intellect? This fluidity of educational delivery will free students to excel beyond their same age peers and progress at their own accelerated academic pace. What type of policy can the superintendent recommend to the state board to afford accelerated students the freedom to reach their highest potential instead of being bound by age and grade level?
Wow. Now I see why you guys are avoiding that one question. Okay, we ready to start?
I like that.
Well, let me just say this first. I think the way that we delivered education decades ago is far better than the way we are doing it today. And in fact, part of my emphasis recently has been to replace the horrible Common Core education philosophy with a classical education, which served students and was proven for centuries. You know, what we've done over the last several decades has ruined education, and it's been directly related to federal government involvement in each of the latest federal schemes for education. In addition to that, I think that instituting a voucher system is going to allow the free market to drive solutions in education, whether it be a fluid system where it doesn't limit children by age and grade level, or whether it be gender-specific classes. I mean, there are all types of models of education that may be productive that we haven't tried. And if we allow the free market to drive solutions in education instead of the government, I think we're going to see excellence rise to the top. We're conservatives, we're Republicans. We believe in the free market. The problems in education are because they're driven by the government. So we need to do everything we can to begin to roll back government. And the way that we can do that is by instituting a voucher system and allowing the free market to drive our solutions. Again, whether it be a fluid system like was described in this very lengthy question, or any other type of model that we haven't tried. But especially, I think it is a good idea to revisit what we did decades ago before the federal government became so involved. And I have to add to that too, the state government has become so heavily involved. They become as bad as the federal government. And as your state superintendent of education, I will do more to assure that the state government doesn't continue to micromanage the classroom as they have with this last administration.
Thank you. So yours is a short. What is your position on social promotion?
There's one out right now about the third grade. You can't read the third grade level to hold you back. And some districts have adopted that, and there's a lot of push from that from the education department, the USC education department. Not USC, United States education department. But I'm not for that in this sense, and I'm for it. But if you're going to hold a child back in the third grade, then you need the child involved, you need the parents involved, and you need the school involved, and the teachers involved. And they make the decision. I don't see how you can do across-the-board kind of things, that this is the way we're going to do it for every child. That doesn't work. So be it.
They know now what happens.
It's Charleston paper. She got advantage.
Okay. The superintendent of education is a policy job. Policy drives academic standards, standards drive curriculum, and curriculum drives assessment. What experience in policy, especially educational policy, do you have that qualifies you for this job?
Well, I've been studying educational policies since 2004, and that's what I sort of did for my life. I was the chair of Charleston County Policy Committee at one point in my service on the board. But there is a lot of policy. You've got the South Carolina State House laws, which then govern the regulations to the State Board of Education, which then govern the policies that we have at the local level. Charleston County policies alone, the book is this big. But I do understand policy, and that's really what this job is about, is addressing bad policies. Because I've always said, we don't have bad education in South Carolina, we've got bad policies. And I think the superintendent needs to be a visionary to identify the policies which are detrimental to our state, to our students, to our teachers, to our parents, and work, and you have to work in conjunction with the State Board of Education. This is not, because I want to, I can't. It is you have to take ideas to the State Board of Education, and in conjunction with the Education Oversight Committee, they're the ones that are writing the standards and deciding on the assessment. But the good thing about the State Superintendent of Education is you get a voice at the table. You get to sit at the State Board of Education, the Education Oversight Committee, the Commission of Higher Education, and also the Technical Board of Education. So you can bring ideas to the table, and I have a lot of ideas on policies there. Thank you.
And since you each got your own question, I'll give you a big back after.
Yeah.
One who will begin, and I'm going to hold up this Standardized testing, the so-called high-stakes testing of no child left behind, race to the top, is a large issue right now. It consumes resources, including money and time. Some say testing provides important information. Suppose you were called on to address the PTA of a school in Lexington 5 School District in in which approximately 40% of the parents have asked to opt their child out of testing. Could you briefly frame what you would tell them as superintendent?
Couple of things. One, digressing, when I did my kickoff speech, I did it in a two-room schoolhouse for the very reason that we did not standardized testing. We cannot standardize human beings, but yet we try to standardize them through testing and through curriculum. I would much rather have my children's teachers tell me what it is they know about my child's ability than a standardized test. If 40% want to opt out of standardized testing, I would say those parents have courage, they stick to the system, and I would applaud those parents because they're not going to get any information from a standardized test that you take in May, and you don't get information back until August, September. So we don't have any diagnostic information to help teachers in the first place. And then secondly, standardized tests, I believe, is one of the reasons why our education system is not what it ought to be. We have this thing called the achievement gap. And the achievement gap is a way for, I think, testing companies to make money off the back of poor folk, children of color, and teachers by saying we need to close this gap. But you can't close the gap based upon a group. The only gap you can be concerned about is the gap between a child's potential and his actual achievement. If you close that gap, then everything else will take care of itself. But I would applaud those parents for not taking the test or allowing the children to take the test.
Common Core states, such as South Carolina, agreed to expand existing statewide longitudinal database systems that contain sensitive student data from pre-kindergarten through post-secondary education. For what exact purpose will this sensitive information be utilized? What organizations will have access to identifiable academic records?
My overall objective in education is to make sure that every child is prepared for workable college and citizenship. That's a vision we have to keep before us. I think an important aspect of that is making sure we protect the powers of new reign to our state by eliminating federal overreach. So a concern I believe people have with systems that collect data or use data is whether or not it's going to lead to any form of micromanagement from the federal government. But also, to the extent those systems are generated by the state, how will the information be used? One, we need to make sure that we are, in fact, protecting the data of our students in accordance to the federal laws that are in place, but also to make sure that no person, be they in the system or outside, has access to data that will put our children's safety at harm, or also limit the ability of us to protect them from predators. So first, we do need to make sure that data is secure and being used only for purposes that will advance the needs of individual children. As far as the data that's part of the SLDS, our state has been implementing something that's called SLICE, and that was aggregating data that has already been collected by the state for some time. And the purpose there, my understanding is, when Dr. Rex went for the grant, was to make sure that the data was being used in a way that would help inform policy to the benefit of schools, to the benefit of children. And so I do think it's important to the extent that we are collecting data that's being used in a way that will benefit children, but not to advance the cause of any federal initiative. My understanding is that with SLDS, or even with SLICE, there's not any new data being collected. Instead, data is being organized in a way that will help make sure that we have data in a meaningful structure that can be used well.
It's just a paper. An article states that charter schools create an unfair playing field. Is that possible? Do you agree or disagree? Do charter schools have an advantage over other schools?
I disagree. I am for parent choice. I'm for competition. Competition in a business world is good. I hate that they're taking competition out of our education system, and I see the advancing of charter schools only as a positive to create that competition. If my child, for instance, was gifted and he needed to go to a special school, I would like to have that option to send him to that school that best suits his individual needs. On the other hand, also, if he had a special need child, then you should be able to send it to the school, send that child to the school that's going to best suit his or her needs. A lot of public school people are afraid of charter schools because they think that's going to take their money away. However, if you are a successful school, public or private, and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're competing, and you are raising students who are going to compete, then if you lose a child to a particular school, then certainly you can take in another child. You have to involve competition to make good business decisions. And I think overall it's a great thing to have parental and charter schools.
Since I got the long one, I had to just pick the little one.
Medium, so I think okay. Do you agree or disagree with having school resource officers in South Carolina schools? If you agree, what should their responsibilities be and their limits? If you disagree, explain the negative points of having school resource officers in the schools.
That's a tough one. You know, it's tough for me because of my work with abstinence education, and let me explain. You know, we've always thought when we teach a child self-control, you know, it's about teaching this personal responsibility and having these inner controls. And if we are able to teach children about that, then we don't need all these external controls. And that's what having a police officer in a school is. It's an external control because we have failed at teaching children about self-control. And beyond that, I just think it's odd that our schools are policed. You know, I think a better way to protect children, and I know this probably sounds pretty radical, but I get accused of being radical a lot. I guess because I'm so conservative. And I brought this up and you know, this is 912, so I'm sure you guys get that a lot too. I actually brought this up at another forum, and I think it was a little over the top for them as well. But if we're talking about safety in schools and protecting kids, I think we ought to allow CWP holders in schools to be opened, because shooters are cowards and they go to gun-free zones to attack their victims. So why not let trained people carry guns and protect students that way instead of having to fund police officers to be in schools?
I thought you were pilots too.
Do you feel sex education should be taught during a regular school day in an after-school program or not at all? Explain your views on sex education.
Wow. Should I get another question?
I'm just kidding.
Let's start.
You know, I believe in the Bible, so the Bible tells us, you know, you should not have sex before marriage. And so that should come first. In reality, you've got to teach something. You don't want to end up like I did when I was 6 years old. They told me there was a cow. The calf dropped out of the sky. So I went down to milk the cow, and then the calf, I sort of make sure it was okay. So you don't want to go to that extreme. You've got to be real careful about how you do this. It certainly should be in the school system, but it should be a policy that the parents and the school system adopts, and not a mandate from somebody from Washington telling us how to do it. And so as long as we've got people involved in how it's done, then it's okay. But I think abstinence and verses that we know about should be emphasized. And Be careful with that.
Do you support H 3435, House Bill 3435, to amend parts of the 1976 Comprehensive Health Education Act, making its way through the Southland Senate? Do you support teaching abstinence until marriage in the sex ed classes? Why or why not? That must be part two.
Pretty much. Well, honestly, I'm really not familiar with the bill that's presently presented. I think there's some controversy associated with it and how we deliver sex education in school. You know, sex does sell, it usually gets you elected, but I actually have served on the ad hoc committee for comprehensive health education for the Charleston County School District. And the law was very clear that it was marriage before sex, abstinence only, and that's what we were to teach. And so we wrote bylaws, and they were very adhered strictly to those. Marianne actually worked on that with me. And they were very, they followed those guidelines that the General Assembly has set forward. I do think that you need to teach, the consequences and STDs and the things that you are exposing yourself to. I think you need to have that knowledge, because just because you say you shouldn't doesn't mean you're not going to, because I am a grandmother, I would have to tell you, from high school. It happens. Just because, our best intentions, we have to also explain to our children what the consequences are. I think that's very important to be for a full education. There was something else I was going to say. Thank you.
The Obama administration released the long overdue first grade evaluation of the federal Head Start program. The results show that the $7 billion per year program provides little benefit to children, but great expense to taxpayers. How would you reform the Head Start program?
I think it goes back to an earlier question about the one-room schoolhouse and two-room schoolhouse. I did my kickoff speech at a two-room schoolhouse that educated black children during the days of segregation. I went through 8th grade. Those kids learned French and Latin at school. They also went on to be lawyers, doctors, doctors, housewives, so forth. How many of you went to kindergarten? Anybody go to kindergarten? How many did not go to kindergarten? How do your parents know you're ready to go to school? What happened to you? You turned 6 years old. And when you turned 6 years old, you went to school and they treated you like you were intelligent, and they put you in a rigorous curriculum and you learned to read and write. My first 3 years, all black school, I learned to read and write in that school. When my parents were working hard, they never read to me. Here's my other point. Now we give a kid readiness test for preschool. And if you're ready, you go back home with your parents. So it's really a not readiness test. Keep that in mind, it's not readiness. So we put you in a not readiness curriculum. And then 6 years later, at the end of 3rd grade, you cannot read. It needs to be completely defunded. If it's not getting kids ready to read and write by the time they enter 1st grade, we need to stop paying for babysitting. I'm sorry, I got it.
We almost left on that one, don't we?
At a minimum, an additional year of state education spending is required for each retained student, and it causes the student to graduate from high school 1 year later, thus delaying labor force entry. To avoid retention for at-risk students, schools must institute effective early interventions that substantially improve grade level skills. Would you advocate for specific funding for early interventions to improve grade level skills? Currently, the costs are taken out of pocket by schools.
One of the things that I will advance, of course, is to make sure that we are ensuring that every child who graduates high school is ready for work, for college, and citizenship. I believe an important part of that is bringing accountability to the classroom. Schools need to be accountable to children, and the South Carolina Department of Education needs to be accountable to taxpayers. I think the way you move in that direction is by advancing students when they are ready. Now, I do believe it's appropriate for the state to set expectations and hold schools and districts whether they meet those expectations. I do think it's appropriate to say that at a minimum, there's a great level at which we don't want to advance a child until they really master fundamental skills. For example, reading or even math. But if we're going to do that, we need to give school leaders the flexibility in funding to invest in the sorts of interventions that will allow them not to punish a child because they hit a wall, but instead to intervene early and give our children what they need so that they are getting the services that are necessary and we are promoting them as they demonstrate mastery. So no, I will not come up with another category to try to micromanage from Columbia what's going on in the classrooms all across our state. Rather, I think we set expectations. We hold schools and districts accountable for getting results, but we give significant flexibility on how they reach those outcomes, and we also offer supports where necessary. But I do not believe we need to micromanage interventions, things like choice, things like flexibility in funding, things like attracting the very best teachers to our classrooms. That's what's going to make sure our children are prepared, not trying to dictate from Columbia what's happening in schools all over the state.
Define the role of the federal government in education. If education in South Carolina has not improved since the formation of the U.S. Department of Education in 1979, what is its purpose and what has it accomplished? Can we do without it, or are we now dependent?
That was a lot of questions. I'm against federal overreach. I do not think we need federal state board anymore. I am in favor of returning the power to our local school districts. I want to limit more of the state input as well. It's very interesting to listen to a lot of these comments that happen from politicians and people that don't know how children learn. If you have been a teacher, if you have a BA or a master's degree or doctorate in education, then you learn how children learn. And you learn through your own school what's best and how they do it. We don't need the federal government to tell us how to teach. Our teachers now are being put in the classroom. They are told how to teach, what to teach, when to teach, and then when they're done, they're taught how to evaluate it. They spend years in school learning how children learn and learning how to evaluate that. And our government is taking that out and away from teachers. And that's wrong. It's also wrong for somebody to stand up here and tell you that they know what's best for children and they know how children learn when they don't know how children learn. If you have not spent years in school yourself learning how children learn, you don't know.
How will you build a relationship with the legislature to help accomplish your goals?
Well, I already have a relationship somewhat with the legislature, good and bad. So I will continue to foster those good relationships I have with the good legislators that we have. There are some very good legislators in the South Carolina Senate and South Carolina House. One of them being Senator Larry Grooms, who's the one who talked me into running for this office, of whom I have his endorsement, of course. There are, of course, other very good conservative legislators that I know will be easy for me to work with. And for those that are roadblocks to good education policy, I will count on people like you to help to remove them and replace them. Because if they stand in the way of good education policy, like school choice, then we're gonna have to work, and I can't do it by myself, and I'll be right there with you leading the way to replace them. Because I won't compromise my principles and try to reach across the aisle, as some of the other candidates have said they will do.
Is there any one idea, practice, or proven method that South Carolina has not tried or hasn't tried in many years that could possibly guarantee student academic achievement?
Absolutely. I'm glad I got that question. I'm here to rewrite the standards. That's one of my main objectives. It really doesn't have that much to do with Common Core. There's some good in Common Core. And South Carolina Teachers of Mathematics promoted Common Core. It's in October at the Greenville Conference. And we're going to extract from that. But what Common Core doesn't do, and neither did the hands-on in the 80s or the inquiry in the 90s, which I was part of the system that wrote that. And y'all remember Barbara Nielsen? She did an excellent job in writing and getting together everybody. And I read over those guidelines before I came here about how much we were involved and how many people were involved in writing the guidelines around 1999 and 2000. But none of them have computer science in it. We want to get people ready for engineering and math and high quality jobs. Well, if you don't tickle the toes in the 4th grade, how in the world are you going to get them?
On high stakes tests. Do we need them? What problems do these tests pose for learning disabled students?
I got started in politics in 2006 because of the No Child Left Behind and high stakes testing. I campaigned for the elimination of the PAC test. It did change to the PAS test, but I was promoting, I know that everyone wants some form of accountability in our system, that teachers are actually performing their jobs, but I promoted the IO, standardized test, because it is an age grade, developmentally appropriate, and students do well, and you can also compare yourself not only with the students in South Carolina, but the students in Georgia or other places, which you can do with our state test. What was the other part of that question? Just how I feel about high stakes testing? Learning disabled. Under the No Child Left Behind learning disabled, what we've done with the exit exams for our high schoolers, unfortunately, it was part of the No Child Left Behind, but they wanted you to implement a test that a student had to take, but it didn't need to be used against the student whether or not they graduated, and also we didn't have to include special needs students. That was something that was done by Inez Tannenbaum, so it's not something that we have to do. The EOs, the State Department, so many people involved in making policy right now. The General Assembly, of course, has passed a law, or they are passing that at the end of the course not be used against you for graduation, because we had several students that were not going to be able to walk this year for graduation because they were unable to do their end of the course exam successfully completed. So they were only going to get a certificate of completion, making them a dropout, and they actually have passed legislation that allows them to receive a diploma after 2015. I don't know why they didn't do that, just say now, but after 2015, students who could not pass the end of the course exam can now appeal to local school districts to get their high school diploma.
And I would love it if you all are willing. I mean, I know the audience wants to ask you something too, but I would love to. I'm sorry.
We'll do it all. We're going to do it all. They'll stay. There's always discussion about back to basics. Because education seems to encompass more and more, we don't seem to return to the basics. What is your philosophy on this topic? What would you do to see this philosophy implemented, or are we at the point of no return?
Excellent question. The nexus of education has to be someone who will stand up and amplify the voices of ordinary South Carolina citizens. We did not give back. The teachers who know how to teach and discipline kids, no amount of money in the world will correct where we are now. We have to go back. We have confused technology with teaching and learning. We've confused nice buildings with teaching and learning. Those things are not teaching and learning. We have to make sure that kids can read, that kids can cipher, that kids can think. If we do that, and everything will take care of itself. We have to go back to basics. If a kid's walking across the classroom and you want them to sit down, you shouldn't have to worry about, well, will they say, I'm a racist or I'm a bigot if I ask them to sit down. Well, you ask this kid to sit down because he's walking across the classroom. And you guys just sit down. And we have really gotten away from that. And you can spend all the money you want in the world, and we're not going to do any better until we get back to saying it like it is and saying we're going to teach these kids, we're going to make sure these kids are educated. That's why kids are leaving third grade not reading, not because they don't have a good IQ. They are leaving third grade not reading because we have allowed them to do what they want to do. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not the kid's fault. The system is fundamentally broken, and somebody has to say that. And if the person not willing to say that, then we're all in trouble and wasting billions and billions of dollars on nothing.
The current superintendent of education and his staff have essentially ignored the district school board and instead elected to communicate primarily with the district superintendent. It appears to be a strange decision considering the district school boards are the ultimate decision makers. Would you continue that practice or adopt another protocol?
I think, as we're talking about protecting powers and integrating to our state and eliminating federal overreach, that's based on the idea that education is a matter that's addressed by states, particularly our parents, our educators, and our educators. I do believe that it's important that we communicate with the South Carolina Department of Education, support our local school boards, and communicate with them in a way that's collaborative. I also believe it's important that South Carolina Department of Education support and reinforce what our school boards are trying to accomplish. I'm particularly concerned with the areas where we have schools that are not performing well because they have dysfunctional school boards. I think if the agency has an open and collaborative relationship with the districts, where they can offer professional development, they help strengthen what our district boards are doing and trying to advance the policies that they will implement at the local level. So to the point of the question, I do think it's very important that the agencies work closely with districts, particularly those that need more assistance in doing well. However, with the districts that are doing well already, I think it's important for the agency, frankly, to get out of the way. In fact, when I was working in the Department of Education, that's the approach I took. The districts that just needed us to indicate what the direction was, I let them go on and conduct their work because they didn't need the agency to get in the way of their success. But the districts that needed support, we made sure that we were reinforcing what they needed in order of professional development and communication. Communication is very important because it's in fact our teachers and our schools that implement the policies of our state as it relates to education, and it's the boards that are implementing the policies at the local level to make sure that work is done.
Do you feel Common Core standards are good or bad for South Carolina students? Explain several arguments for or against the standards.
Overall, I think they're bad. In several areas especially. My background is in early childhood education. And a lot of our problem with not being able to read is not going to come from forcing 4-year-olds into readiness programs. If you have an education background, you know that young children learn best at a certain age through different type of manipulatives and play. When you're taking our 4 or 5-year-olds and you're sitting them at a desk with paper and pencil, they are not going to learn to read any faster. A problem with some of our politicians is they don't understand some of the needs that our children have. Policies are going to have to be adopted, and policies are to be understood. The job of the state superintendent is to be an advocate for our children. to work with the State Board of Education and to work with legislatures. Who best to understand, interpret law, and argue and advocate for our children than an attorney who has advocated for clients for 23 years? That is a skill that I bring to the table, and I think it's very important. And on top of that, I have been in the classroom. I know what our teachers need. I know what our students need. And with that background, that makes me your candidate for state superintendent.
How do you spell it?
Money was allocated by the Senate Finance Committee towards expanding kindergarten programs for 4-year-olds. Do you believe that expanding kindergarten programs is an effective use of public funds? Why? Is it possible to begin school too early?
No, I do not support expanding 4-year-old kindergarten. Absolutely not. That's a liberal philosophy. That's kind of a silly question for a bunch of Republican candidates. I mean, really, who wrote that question? This is a 9/12 meeting. Do I need to expound? I mean, seriously. What was the why part? I mean, do I need to?
The actual question part, do you believe that expanding kindergarten programs is an effective use of public funds? Why or not? And is it possible to begin school too early?
Well, you know, fundamentally, I think, yes, it is probably too early. You know, I hate to give my buddy over here, Gary, so much credit, but he makes he gives me credit from time to time, so I'm going to give it back to him here. Yeah, he makes some very good points about, you know, the babysitting part of this, all of this, starting kids so early, you know, the readiness part. I believe it's a way, in my opinion, to get our children earlier. You know, the government just wants to get a hold of our kids earlier so they can start indoctrinating them at an earlier age. They want them earlier, they want to keep them later. They can start data mining them as early as they can. And, you know, as far as this Read to Succeed bill that was passed this year by our state legislature, you know, I'm so disappointed with our legislature. And I don't know what they were thinking with that bill. So many good conservatives signed on to that bill. And when I was reading through it, because we get a lot of questions about that, there was a serious data mining component in this. I mean, they are going to be, in this readiness assessment they're going to be doing to these young children to enter, you know, this kindergarten at a very young age. They're going to be doing psychological testing of these young children. It's pitiful. So, you know, I think it's an attempt by the federal government to do the data mining and just get a hold of children at younger ages. So, you know, I don't support it on multiple levels, not just the funding.
It sounds wonderful to say the money follows the job. Have you given much thought to how this would be instituted? What would your plan be for making it work and keeping it from becoming an accounting nightmare?
My motto for the entire campaign is that it benefits the child, and let's do it. And that covers a lot of territory. But on the funding issue and, you know, how that's going to happen with, you know, vouchers and that kind of thing, I think the money should follow the child. And that means that you still got to look at it individually. You can't just sort of say, you know, we're going to do it this way, it's going to be fair. But if it benefits the child, and the child needs this special needs thing, then I think we move forward. I am. But how to figure out how the counties are funded means that I've got to visit every single school district in the state of South Carolina in the first year. And that's in my preamble of my campaign. And that doesn't mean just going down there and just talking. I mean being on the ground and seeing what's going on in all the districts. I'm also in touch with the counties who monitor the districts, in other words, they audit the districts. And they are going to be brought to the table to help me understand how to fund. I think we've got to fund first by student population and by district and not county. And it's a complicated issue. I don't have all the answers to it, but if it benefits the child, I will do it.
schools within the public educational system in South Carolina? If not, please explain your reasons.
I support all school choices. I support vouchers, private schools. I actually wrote a charter to start it. I wrote an application to start a charter school in 2008. But I was limited, unfortunately, to be creative and innovative because they refused to give you waivers out from underneath what traditional public education has to do. What I do like about charter schools is that they have their own board of directors, and so you get answers for school issues immediately, and I think that's important. I would really like to see every school have their own school board, more or less, because that's where the action happens. Unfortunately, I think Charleston County is too large. I think we need to deconsolidate because I know that there are a lot of issues that we have in this county that don't get answered at the local level in the communities that are having these issues. They're being decided for them by a small group of people, usually in the district, but we as the board usually end up making that decision ultimately. But we try really hard to do what is right by the communities and what they want. But there is a law that was written called Grants for Students Attending Private School. I think it's 594010, I believe is the number. I would like to see that move forward because I know that in Arizona they did rule that the question, of course, is the religious question. Are you giving, separation of state and church? But by giving it to the